Hello, welcome to the CADAC reporting training session for agencies. Today, we will be covering the core features that apply to all reports on CADAC. We will be covering a lot of information in this training session, so this will just be a first step in your journey into the world of CADAC reporting. At the end of the presentation, we will go over additional resources and tools available to you as you walk through all the reports and features available in CADAC. Before we begin, I want to provide you with an overview of the content that we will be covering today. We will start by covering some of the key features of the new CADAC report and also touch on some of the differences between the new report and the legacy system. Then we will move on to part 2, which covers key aspects of using the report and some of the common elements and features contained within the new CADAC reports. In part 3, we will do a deep dive into the financial and statistical details and summary report. In part 4, we will cover the financial and statistical detailed trend report. In part 5, we will cover the comparison of financial and statistical details report. In part 6, we will go over the administrative reports. When we go over those reports, we will discuss them in the presentation, and then we will also walk you through some of those reports to answer some common questions and inquiries that an agency might have. Then we also will go over the additional resources and support that is available to you. So now let's start with an overview of reporting in the new CADAC platform. In this section, we will be reviewing how to access the report, navigate around inside the report, apply filters to a report, and finally, we will look at how to export the data. To access the reports in CADAC, please log in using your credentials, which is your email and the password that you created. Once you are logged in, you will see CADAC main page. On the top menu, click on Agency Dashboard option. This will take you to a new page where you will see the menu in the lower screenshot here. From this menu, you can click on Report List found under the Reporting section. Today, we will also touch upon some of the public reports available on CADAC. Anyone can access those public reports, which only show aggregate data and no identifying information. To access those, from the main page of CADAC, simply scroll down to the Explore Our Data section and then click on Create Your Own Reports. Only certain reports are available in the public reporting section, and as I previously mentioned, those reports only have a report on aggregate data. They show no identifying information. Additionally, we have safeguards in place to ensure that no organization's data could be identified. As an example of this being that if a user tries to filter a public report down to less than 5 organizations, the data will be hidden. This ensures that through process of elimination by using the filters available, no one could isolate an organization's data. Now we can move forward to the next section, which is an overview of the reports. The new reports available to you in CADAC have some common features and characteristics, and we will introduce those to you. Now we can start with the financial and statistical reports. When you have a financial or statistical report open, you can easily navigate between the different financial and statistical reports by clicking on the Available Reports menu. This menu is always positioned on the far left of your report window. When you open the list of available reports, you can click on a different financial or statistical report. To navigate there, you can also see which report you are currently on, as this will be the highlighted item in the list. To close this menu, you can simply click on the X icon in the top right or click anywhere on the main report page. The tables in the report can be sorted by any of the columns contained within the table. This can be done in 2 ways. The first way is to click on the column header to sort the data by that column. When the table is sorted by that column, the column header shows a black arrow. You can click again to sort by ascending or descending order. The direction of the arrow will indicate which order you are currently sorting by. In the upper screenshot here, we can see that the little black underneath the word line in the line number and description column. The arrow is pointed up, indicating that we are sorting from lowest values to the top of the column, to highest value at the bottom. We see here that line 4175 is at the top of this image, while line 4617 is at the bottom. Another way to sort this table data is to click on the More Options icon. which is a button that has 3 dots in it found in the top right corner when you are hovering over a table. Again, please note that this icon will only appear when your mouse hover the table, if you are interested in sorting. When you click on those 3 dots in the menu that appears, click on Sort By and choose the desired field for sorting. To remove the sorting, click on the This menu again, then Sort By and select the field that is sorted, which will have a check mark next to it. By unchecking the column, you are removing the sorting. Now let's look at how we can apply filters to a report. Each report has a filters bar situated on the left, which when you click on it, will open the filters menu. This behaves the same way as the available reports menu that we already covered. Click anywhere on filters bar and it will open the filters menu panel showing the available filters. Some reports have additional filters that can be accessed by clicking on the More Filters button at the bottom. To close any of the panels, click on the X button in the top right or simply click anywhere in the main reporting page. The Filters panel contains filters that allow you to adjust the data. Some filters will allow you to select multiple options and some will only allow you to select one option at a time. You can also clear all of your applied filters and return the report to the default state by clicking on the Clear Filters button at the bottom. Note, the Clear Filters button does not clear any search entries in the search bar of the filters. The search entry must be manually removed by clicking on the eraser box icon in the top right corner of the filters. We have highlighted the eraser icon in the red box beside the number 2 on those screenshots. Now let's talk about exporting data. The first step is to prepare your data for export by working with the report and applying the necessary filters. Note that you can only export data individually for each table in the report. Once a table displays the necessary information, click on the More option icon in the top right corner. Again, this is the button with the 3 dots that appears in the top right of any table, but only when you hover over a table of interest. In the menu that appears, click on Export Data. This will open a pop-up window and from here you select the Data with Current Layout option, then click on Export. The table you have selected will be exported and will only show the data with current layout in Power BI. Please note that only tables can be exported from Power BI. When you export a chart, you will only be able to do this through the Summarize Data option, which means that the data used for the chart and not the chart itself will be exported in Excel. We also want to mention that the exports are limited to a specific table. You will see that some reports contain multiple tables. If you want to export all of the tables in a report, you would need to repeat this step for each shown in the report. When you export your data, there will be a note at the bottom of your export. We refer to this area as a footer of your export. And this footer area provides you with some of key pieces of information regarding your export. This footer note will contain an overview of all of the filters you have applied in order to generate this data export. Now we are going to get a little technical here for a second, but bear with me. There is a limitation to the data exports that we want to make you aware of. In Power BI, there is a data export limitation of 150,000 data intersections. This sounds like a lot, but some of those tables contain a wealth of information, pulling in data from a variety of different sources and databases in CADAC. Additionally, based on those reporting tables are set up, each row can have multiple data intersections, so the exports that you download from CADAC may have significantly less than 150,000 rows, but because each row has multiple intersections of data, you might come up against this limitation. If it happens, you will notice a message in the footer of your data export stating, "Exported data exceeded the allowed volume." Some data might have been omitted. And again, this message only appears in the footer of your export, which is at the very bottom of your exported Excel file. To get around this limitation, consider filtering the data and then exporting again to avoid this limitation. You can always export a few times and then combine the exported data files once you have them. Now we can start diving into some of the financial and statistical reports. We will first start by the financial and statistical details and summary report. This report contains two components, the financial and statistical details and the financial and statistical summary. Each component shows data from organizations based on the filters applied for one fiscal year. The differences between the details and the summary is that the details component show every line from the financial and statistical forms, while the summary only shows subtotal lines from the forms. Here we have provided you with a screenshot of an example report. In this screenshot, we want to draw your attention to a few elements. Firstly, you can see some tabs at the top of this report, one showing the summary and the other the details. Right now, we can see that the summary is selected and the summary report is being shown to us. In this report, there are a total of 5 data tables. The top table shows us an overview summary of all organizations contained within the report currently. Below the organization details table, we have a pair of financial tables, followed by a pair of statistical tables. The top table in those pairs show an overview of the data broken out for each organization, while the lower table in those pairs shows summary data and statistics based on your selected organizations, but does not show organization-specific data. A few notes on how those reports are set up. Firstly, we want to note that all revenue line percentages are in comparison to total revenues, which is line 4700 on the financial form. And all expenses are in comparison to the total expenses line 5600. As I mentioned, this report contains both summary and detailed versions. The summary only showing subtotals, while details show the information for each line of the financial and statistical forms. You can navigate between those two versions of the report by clicking on the appropriate tab at the top of the report window. And as mentioned previously, the filter panel can be used to see all available filters for the data. In the filter panel, you are presented with a large variety of filtering options. The filters allow you to tailor the report outputs to your specific analysis needs. You have the option here at selecting which organizations are included in your analysis. You can select a program list, specific organizations by CADAC ID, region, revenue ranges, charity status, and other items. Additionally, you can also select which financial or statistical lines you would like included in the analysis. There is a public version of this report available. As previously mentioned, the public reports show aggregate data from all organizations within CADAC. You will notice that the output of this report has far fewer tables than your agency version. All tables which show identifying organizations information have been removed, and only the summary statistics tables remain. As previously mentioned, if a public report uses filters that data to less than 5 organizations, the report will not populate for confidentiality purposes. This ensures that users cannot use process of elimination on the filters to identify specific organizations. One important distinction between public and agency reports is the public reports have access to all organizations in the CADAC system, whereas your agency reports will only show you more specific information and identifying data by organization. However, you are limited to only the organizations that are contained in one of your program lists. If an agency user, you want to generate a nationwide benchmark to compare your organization with, you might want to use the public report rather than your agency report, as more organizations are contained within the public version. Now we will do a demonstration to walk you through an example of this report.
By clicking on the Available Reports filter pane, I'm able to see the 3 financial and statistical data reports that are available to me as an agency user. I can see right now, in order to be able to situate myself, that I'm viewing the financial and statistical details and summary data report because it's highlighted in gray. If I click on the Filters pane, this provides me detailed information of how I want to mine the data in the specific report. Because this is testing information, I've chosen a fake program list which includes 10 test organizations for fiscal year 1920. If I click on More Filters, I'm able to mine the report with more specificity based on my needs as a funding agency. Based on my current selection criteria, I can see that of the 10 testing organizations, there are 10 financial forms and 10 statistical forms with data for the 1920 fiscal year. In the report itself, the data updates in real time. The Financial and Statistical Details and Summary report provides information about all of the subtotals in the financial form and also all of the subtotals in the statistical form. This particular section includes information at a disaggregated level for individual organizations within the program list that I've selected. Below that, I have the subtotals at an aggregate level for those 10 organizations I've selected. The aggregate information related to financial data also includes a percentage of total. For example, for line 4175, I can see that all 10 organizations' dollar value of total earned revenues is 724, which represents 32% of the total revenues for the entire group of 10 organizations. Below that, I have the information available at a disaggregated level for artistic activities related to the statistical form. This information includes subtotals only, and then below that I have that exact same information at an aggregate level. This report is interesting and useful in the sense that as an agency user, I'm able to isolate information for specific lines. For example, visually, if I wanted to benchmark and compare individual organizations' total earned revenue, I could click on that line, and as you can see, it highlights and isolates that information. I'm able to look at that line visually for each individual organization and compare it to the aggregate data for total earned revenues. The report includes statistical indicators like mean or average, median, standard deviation, and different percentiles. This can be an interesting exercise to compare financial information of individual organizations against these statistical indicators at an aggregate level for the grouping of these 10 organizations I've selected. For more information on how to interpret and use these statistical indicators, please use the user guide for agencies for reporting capabilities available on the CADAC website. I'm now going to select different data based on specific filters. So for example, if I had a larger program list and I wanted to isolate information based on a city, town, or reserve, I could do that. So in this case, I'm curious to see information about organizations in my program list in the Greater Sudbury region only. What the report does is it updates in real time and it isolates those organizations from the Greater City of Sudbury only and provides me that information. In this particular case, the data are not particularly robust because we're using a testing list of 10 fake organizations. However, if you're using a larger, for example, multidisciplinary program list of a couple of hundred organizations, isolating or mining your data based on those filters does give you that ability to customize your data and information appropriately. If I click on total revenues again, it will deselect or de-highlight that information, and I have access again visually to all of the subtotal lines in the financial form and then also in the statistical form. With any data table in these reports, one can extract the information in an Excel spreadsheet. So if I hover over these three dots with more options and click here and click on export data, this will generate the data table in an Excel spreadsheet, which allows me to manipulate the information and further customize it. If I click on report detailed, the information and presentation of data is exactly the same as the summary report. However, it provides information for every single financial line in CADAC based on the selection criteria I've made, and then also every single statistical line as well. I do want to point out as well that in the statistical form, the percentage of totals is not available because of the complexity of calculations. This report is particularly useful because it allows you as an agency user to have a very quick snapshot of either all of the subtotal lines in both the financial and statistical forms, and then also all of the financial and all statistical lines.
Now we can move on into the next financial and statistical report. We can discuss the financial and statistical detailed trend report. This report shows financial and statistical line details for 2 years or more. Users can filter by line, program list, and CADAC ID. Agency users have access to organization within their agency program lists. The report also allows you to look at the financial and statistical line details in both table and chart form. In this screenshot of the report, we have highlighted some of the key features of this report. First, I will draw your attention to the 2 tabs at the top, the Report Detailed View and the Report Chart View. Here you can navigate back and forth between the tabular view, shown here in the screenshot, and a more visual analysis using charts. Next, you will see there are a total of 4 tables shown here. The top table shows financial details by specific organizations, and the next table down shows summary financial results broken out by the fiscal years you have selected. This approach is then mirrored below, but specifically for statistical forms. Now we will switch to the chart view. This will show us the same data, but now in a visualized format. You will notice some key elements here. Firstly, I want to draw your attention to the totals toggle in the top right. In this screenshot, you can see the total toggle is turned off. Therefore, the charts are showing us results from every line in the financial and statistical forms. If you toggle the totals on, it will only show you total or subtotal lines from each of the forms. Please keep in mind that you can use the Filters panel to select a custom combination of financial and statistical lines from either form as well. Next, there are 2 buttons, one for line charts, which we are viewing here, and another for the bar chart view, which we will show in a moment. The charts themselves show a summary of financial data at the top, and the lower chart shows statistical data. In this screenshot, we can see that the reports look like the totals toggled on. You will notice there are far fewer lines and data points now contained in the charts as we are only showing totals. We also wanted to show you the outputs if you select the bar chart view. The functionality from the line chart view still applies when in the bar chart view. Similar to the other financial and statistical reports, we have a wide variety of filters available, allowing you to tailor the report to your specific needs. You can select a specific organization, program list, region, etc. You can also select which lines from either the financial or statistical forms you wish to analyze, and those filters apply to both the table's output and the chart outputs. Now shifting gears to the public report. This report looks similar to the agency version of the report. However, users only have access to the summary tables. They do not have access to tables which identify organizations. Again, you can select here that there are less than 5 organizations with financial data based on the user's filter selection. So there is an error message letting the user know that their filters are too narrow and they should consider expanding their options to view this report. Now that we have seen this report, we will now be showing directly in the website how to use the report.
The Financial and Statistical Details Trend Report is particularly useful as an agency user because it allows you to view longitudinal data year over year of organizations in your funding agency. In this particular instance, in the filters, we've selected fiscal years 2018-19 and 2019-20. As with all of the reports, we're using fake data, so the information is not particularly robust. So the fiscal year selection can be made here under fiscal year, and then we can also select the program list within the program list selection. And as with all reports, if I click on more filters, this will provide me the opportunity to customize the report based on my own needs. The trend report is helpful because it can be useful for benchmarking purposes year over year. And while the report doesn't include variances, percentage variances per se, one can extract the data tables into Excel and insert their own formulas or columns. As an agency user, you can export the data table by clicking on these 3 dots, which provides you the option to export the information into Excel as a data table. By doing so, you can insert a column with a formula that will give you a percentage amount year over year. And in this case, we've selected 1819 and 1920. So that would allow you to view that information at a disaggregated level for those individual organizations in your program list, or at an aggregate level below. So the table my cursor is currently hovering over represents aggregate data of each of those respective organizations just above, taken from the program list. And as you can see, it consolidates that data for the 1819 and 1920 fiscal year. The same principle applies for the two tables below for the statistical data based on our artistic activities. So in this table, I have information at a disaggregate level for every single organization in that program list. And then below that, I have the aggregate version for those two respective fiscal years. Some funders require that organizations include variances in their grant applications that are material or significant. And this particular report can be really helpful to isolate that information for specific individual organizations to help corroborate or support what an organization has or has not included in an application. If I click on the filters pane again, I can also isolate the information based on specific financial and statistical lines and develop correlations between the two of them. As a hypothetical example, I'd like to look at the total earned revenues, the total artistic expenses, and then also I'm curious to see corresponding digital activities and also corresponding digital attendance in the statistical form. I'm able to search by specific line numbers. By unselecting all of the line numbers, I can search by keyword. I'll start off with total earned, and by hovering my mouse, I'll get a pop-up of the full line label. I'm also going to select the total revenues, the total artistic expenses, and then on the statistics side, I had mentioned that I wanted to look at the digital activities and digital attendance. And again, if I hover my mouse over one of these lines, it will give me the full line label. And if you're not familiar with the line numbers and line labels, there's a document available in CADAC upon logging in that enumerates every single financial and statistical line with its respective label and definition, which can be helpful in undertaking your analysis. I can see in the report now that the information has updated in real time, and if I continue scrolling this way, I can see that the data is available for all 10 organizations at a disaggregated level, and then again at an aggregate level. So based on how you want to customize and based on your own needs as a funder, you can create correlations between your financial data and your artistic activities.
Now we can continue and see the Comparison Financial and Statistical Details report. The Comparison of Financial and Statistical Details report shows the data for financial and statistical lines between two fiscal years. Users can compare the data based on the filters they have selected. As an agency user, you will have access to all organizations within any of your agency's program lists. This report will allow you to look at and compare the financial and statistical data of a group of organizations, a specific organization, or a program list. In this screenshot of the report, we have highlighted some of the key features of this report. Similar to the other financial and statistical reports, you will see there are a total of 4 tables shown here. The top table shows financial details by specific organizations, and the next table down shows summary financial results broken out by the fiscal years you have selected. This approach is then mirrored below, but specifically for statistical forms. Similar to the other financial and statistical reports, we have a wide variety of filters available, allowing you to tailor the report to your specific needs. You can select a specific organization, program list, region, etc. You can also select which line from either the financial or statistical forms you wish to analyze. Switching over to the public version of this report, users will have access to the summary tables only. No identifying organization information is available in this report. Similar to other public reports, this data is pulled from all organizations in CADAC, which you agency version shows you just the organization associated with your program list. Now that we have seen this report, we will now be showing how to navigate and access the report in the website directly.
The comparison of financial and statistical details report does have similarities to the financial and statistical summary and details report. However, this report also includes information at a disaggregated level about percentage of revenue and percentage of expense based on individual lines for individual organizations. The information can also be organized by fiscal year selection and other filters. If I click on filters, I'm able to customize that information, again, based on my needs as a funder. In this particular case, I've selected 1819 and 1920 and a fake program list with 10 fake organizations. Some funders ask organizations to submit a deficit reduction plan. And this is a report that could be very useful for these purposes because it provides you that percentage value per organization based on total revenues and based on total expenses. So for example, if I wanted to understand what the percentage value was of an accumulated deficit in relation to total revenues, or the percentage value of an unrestricted net asset deficiency in relation to total revenues, this is the report that I'd want to use for this. It also allows me to understand the financial health of organizations. So based on that, I'm going to isolate those financial lines. So I'm going to click on the financial lines pane, unselect all lines, and then search by total revenues. And if I hover my mouse over the line number, I get a pop-up of the line label, and all line numbers, line labels, and line definitions for the financial and statistical forms are available in CADAC when I log in to view organizations at the top of the page. I'm also going to select the accumulated surplus or deficit line, and then also the unrestricted net assets line. And of course, with all reports, if I click on more filters, I'm able to further mine and customize the data that I want to review. But for the purposes of this report, I want to demonstrate how I can see those percentage values at a disaggregated and aggregate level based on the program list that I've selected. Now we can see here that the report has updated in real time and reflects the line number selections that I made. The information is available on a per organization basis for the 2018-19 fiscal year, and if I continue scrolling to the right, we can see here that Test Org 3, for example, has a $59 deficit, accumulated deficit that is, and represents a negative 44% value based on the total revenues of $134. So if you're working with individual organizations as part of a program and you need to be able to identify the financial health of an organization, this report is really helpful to be able to identify something like this. The unrestricted net assets line also provides this information and can be helpful to glean problematic financial situations. Below, I have that exact same information, but at an aggregate level. And then if I scroll to the right, I have different statistical indicators, such as mean, median, standard deviation, and different percentiles. And again, for more information on how to interpret and use these statistical indicators, there is a user guide available under the Training for Agency section on the CADAC website, specific to reporting features. Below this, I have the same information, but for the statistical form, and then also at the aggregate level. And to reiterate, there are no percentage of totals available for the statistical form because the totals are quite complex and there are correlated lines throughout, so it's not possible for the system to actually extrapolate that information. So this report is useful for determining the financial health of organizations, but it's also useful in that it can be customized in numerous different ways, and you can also mine the data and isolate specific lines based on your needs. And because the data tables can be extracted into Excel by hovering over the three dots here, one could theoretically combine certain data tables from other reports with this report, for example, based on the selection of the same filtered criteria and the same program lists.
Now we can go to the next section, which is the administrative reports, and walk you through some of the use case examples. Now let's dive into the administrative reports. Right now, there are currently 6 administrative reports available to agency users. I will provide you with a quick summary of each, and then we will see a demonstration of some of the use case examples for some of those reports. Unlike the financial and statistical reports, those administrative reports help agencies keep track of key aspects around managing CADAC and helping keep track of your organization as they work through the various CADAC processes. The first administrative report is the agency and organization's detailed list. This report allows agency users to quickly view the organizations contained within a program list. This is a great resource for program officers. Next is the program list status by organization. This report provides you with an overview of the status of all organizations found within one of your program lists. Next is the organization's contact list. This provides you with an overview of all contact information for the organizations within a program list. This is a great report if you need to quickly reach out to a group of organizations. You can pull all of their contact info from one central report. Next is the program list by form status. This is similar to the program list status by organization, except this report does not show organizations' information. This report focuses more on the overall statistics and status of organizations contained within a program list. Next is the profile comments list report. This report will only show you all the comments that have been left on organization profiles. As a reminder, only CADAC staff and agencies users can leave notes on an organization's profile. An organization cannot see those comments. Those comments are typically used for internal administrative purposes, so this report easily shows you how to view and export all relevant administrative comments on your organizations. And finally, we have the reconciliation process report. This report will provide you with an overview of how organizations are progressing through the reconciliation process. Now that we have done a quick overview of all of the reports, we will provide you with a demonstration on how to navigate those reports.
The agency and organization's detailed list provides a summary of every single program list within your respective agency, which you can filter by one or more program lists, or by CADAC ID, or by organization legal name. The particular way the information in this report is displayed could be useful to see an organization's history within your funding agency. For example, to see whether it has moved from one program to another historically. By looking at the different columns, we're able to see the name of the program list that each respective organization is attached to. So the first column refers to the program list. The second one is the program list status. And based on where a particular program list is situated within the trajectory of a deadline, the status may change. So for example, if your deadline has passed, you've had an assessment panel or an adjudication, and the organizations in that program list have been funded, the program list status would change to something different. The CADAC ID refers to the individual identifier of the organization that's attached to those program lists, and then we have the legal name, and then the application deadline of the respective program list. So in this particular case, because we're using test data, the information is not particularly robust. But in reality, you would have access to multiple program lists and all those organizations that have been attached to them. The data can also be filtered by application deadline, which can allow you to analyze when an organization has applied, for example, to a specific deadline, or if you wanted to see how specific programs are clustered based on a certain time frame within your agency. It also gives you a sense of how many organizations and programs you have in your funding agency, and it can be useful to see patterns. For example, if you've streamlined programs or if you wanted to see the dispersion of organizations in all of your different programs and program lists. The program list status by organizations report provides a snapshot of where each organization stands within one or more program lists within your agency in terms of what they're required to submit related to the respective granting deadline that they've applied to. In this particular case, I've selected fiscal years 1819 and 1920, and I've selected a fake program list with 10 organizations. PFY refers to partial fiscal year. In instances where I have organizations that have partial or stub fiscal years, I would be able to identify or isolate these. In this particular case, none of the organizations in my program list have a partial fiscal year, so I don't have the option to choose that. If I look at the way the information is displayed in the report, I can see in the first column that I have the legal name of the organization. If I toggle to the right, I have the CADAC ID, the organization discipline, which is assigned by the organization itself, the respective fiscal year end of each organization, whether they have a partial fiscal year, and then the status of their financial form. So I can see here in 2018-19, of the 10 organizations in this program list, very few have been reconciled and locked. So the majority are submitted. One of them has been locked by an analyst at CADAC, and then one of them has been requested to make revisions. FS stands for financial statements, and I can see here that all 10 organizations have uploaded their financial statements for 18-19. And then last submitted date corresponds to when each organization went into CADAC and updated their financial form for 18-19. If I scroll to the right, the information duplicates itself for the 18-19 statistical form. So I can see in this particular case that 9 of the 10 organizations in my program list have not submitted any statistical data for 18-19, and only one of them has submitted, and they submitted on March 27th, 2023. And if I continue toggling to the right, the information repeats itself for 1920 for both the financial form and the statistical form. So if you're an organization that releases funds that are conditional based on the locking of financial data, this particular report can be really helpful because it isolates at an individual level the status of all of the organizations in your program list, but it also shows you the last update that they would have made. So if you also require organizations to make updates in the financial and statistical forms or base conditions based on those updates, this would also be the report that you would want to use that could be very helpful for those purposes. The organization's contact list report is a repository of every single organization applying to your respective agency. In addition to enumerating every single organization and its key profile information, it also includes the program lists to which each respective organization is attached to. I'm able to filter the information based on program lists. So in this case, I've selected 10 fake organizations, or I can also filter by CADAC ID or organization legal name. I'm also able to filter by creation date, and what this means is that I can see when a particular organization created its profile in CADAC. So it gives me a historical overview of when they actually started using CADAC. If I look at the information that's available to me in the report itself, I can see that I have access to the program list, the CADAC ID, the organization legal name, all the contact information related to each organization, address, postal code, fiscal year end, whether the organization is incorporated or not, and whether the organization is incorporated federally or provincially, whether it has a not-for-profit status, and also whether it's a charity and its charitable number. As you can see, there's also information like business number, organization discipline, key contact, and email information, and below also the practice and specialization that relates to each respective organization. If you don't have a database of all of your organizations with centralized information like this, it can be very helpful for communications, but also for analysis of the types of organizations that are applying to your agency and are funded by your agency. So you're able to filter by the different fields when you export the report into Excel. And if you hover over the 3 dots at the top right corner of any data table and click here, you're able to export the data into Excel, which allows you to customize and filter the data as you deem appropriate. There's also potential future opportunities, for example, to map some of these data fields and the different attributes of the organizations. So for example, if I wanted to create a visual or some kind of representation of organizations in my agency, and for example, look at dance organizations within a specific region and map that out, is something that I could do with this particular report. It could also be really helpful for e-blasts and communication purposes when sending key pieces out to client organizations. It's really a great report that generates all of the fields related to each organization that applies to your respective agency. The program list by forms status report is similar to the program list status report by organizations. However, this report provides an aggregate overview of the different statuses of all organizations in your agency or by specific program lists based on fiscal year selection. So in this particular case, I've selected the 1819 and 1920 fiscal years through the fiscal year pane, and then I've also selected 10 test organizations from the program list. PFY refers to partial fiscal year, and in instances where the organizations included in my program list have partial fiscal years, I'm able to select their inclusion. In this particular case, none of the organizations have a partial fiscal year, so I don't have the option to select that from this list. As you can see in the report, it provides information at an aggregate level and the statuses of both the financial and statistical forms for the program list that I've selected. The report also provides a percentage of total column. So I can see for the 1819 fiscal year that out of the 10 organizations, or I should say 10 financial forms, one of them is locked, which represents 10%, and then one is in revise, which is also 10%, and 8 are submitted, which is 80% of the total. If I continue to the right, the report also breaks out that information for the 1920 fiscal year. In the grand total columns, the report consolidates all of those numbers for 1819 and 1920, and then also provides a percentage of total value as well. So I can see for locked forms for 1819 and 1920, there are 2, and then for submitted forms, there are 17, which is 85% of 100%. And then if I circle back to the ones that are in revise, I can see that there are only 1 that is in revise for 1819 and 1920, which represents 5% of 100%. The same principle applies for the statistical form. However, the statistical form does not get analyzed or locked by financial analysts at CADAC, and therefore there are not as many statuses as you would see in the financial forms section. So in this particular case, we have a draft status and submitted status, and the way the calculations are presented are exactly the same as on the financial side. Visualizations below are helpful in that they provide different statuses of both the financial and statistical form, But you also have a version that breaks things out per status. So the circular chart that you're seeing includes all the statuses, and then the form status chart breaks everything out by individual status at an aggregate level. So the circular chart we can see includes 20 financial forms for 1819 and 1920, which corresponds to the number here in the grand totals. We can also see here we have 11 statistical forms, and that includes all statuses, and that corresponds to the grand total column here. Below that, we have the form status broken out by individual status, by financial form and statistical form. So if we look at locked, we can see that there are 2 forms in 1819 and 1920 that are locked, 1 that's in revise, and 17 that are submitted. And then the same principle would apply to the statistical form here, which is in purple. So this can be really helpful to understand either by program, for example, or globally, holistically, which forms are active within the CADAC system, if you will, or within those organizations that are using CADAC and are applying to your agency. It's also really good to provide an aggregate snapshot of both the financial form statuses and also the statistical form statuses. So this report allows you as an agency user, it's another way to analyze and determine, for example, where there may be gaps, or if there are certain programs or organizations that might not be completing their statistical information, and it allows you to analyze this holistically or also at a program list level. The profile comments list is useful in that it generates comments left on an organization's profile, either by CADAC staff or by agency staff. When comments are left by agency staff, they are only accessible within your own respective agency, so you would not have access to comments left by staff from a different agency through which that organization might be funded. Because we're using testing data, we don't have a lot of real examples, but the comments in this particular report are useful in that they can provide contextual information with regard to anomalies, for example, in the way that organizations may have recorded information in either the financial or statistical forms, for example. As with most reports, one can select the data based on program lists, or by individual CADAC ID, or by organization legal name. You can also filter the information based on when those particular comments were left or created. By looking at the report, we can see here that the first column is the information about the program list which the organization is attached to. Then I have the CADAC ID, the organization legal name, the title of the comment that was left, or the subject if you will. And then if I continue scrolling, I have access to the actual profile comment, who created it, and then also the creation date of that particular comment. The report can be really useful because it can address issues that may have arisen in financial statements. So for example, if an organization has had restatements or atypical ways of presenting financial information, so deferrals or even mislabeling, that's happened in the financial statements. Or it could be exceptional ways of presenting financial data and statistical data in the CADAC forms. These are some examples of the comments that agency and CADAC staff have left in the report and that have been useful to agency staff in better understanding why information is presented in a certain way. If your agency has new staff, the comments can be really helpful for gleaning information about certain details in the forms and who might need help, for example, interpreting information from previous fiscal years or based on retroactive data. So downloading these comments can be really helpful to support any kind of anomalies that may occur in an organization's financial or statistical forms or financial statements. The Reconciliation Progress Report can be helpful in that it tracks the progress of one or more programs within your agency related specifically to the status of reconciliation of financial forms. It only provides information related to financial forms and not the statistical forms. The report is a little bit different from the program list status report by organizations in that it provides an aggregate view of one or more program lists, and it shows you the aggregate results for the respective program list you've chosen. And again, it doesn't include any data or information related to the statistical form. So the option to filter is based on one fiscal year only for this report, and we can see here that I've chosen 1920, and again I've chosen a fake program list with 10 fake organizations. If I look at the report itself, the first column refers to the name of the program list, the discipline of that program list, so in this case it's digital arts, the application deadline, the reconciliation deadline. The reconciliation deadline is set to 2 months after the application deadline by default, as per CADAC's reconciliation policy. And then if I continue toggling to the right, I also have information about the financial forms at an aggregate level. So the number of forms will always correspond to the number of organization in my program list. So in this case, there are 10 forms ready for reconciliation. Refer to those forms that are ready to be reconciled. So what that means is that 9 out of the 10 organizations have submitted their forms, and they've also uploaded their financial statements, which means that they're ready to be analyzed by a financial data analyst at CADAC. And then the forms that are locked refer to the ones that have been reconciled and locked. So in this case, there's 1. Forms are not locked, pretty self-explanatory. So there are 9 in this particular case, and then it breaks these values out into a percentage. So percentage locked based on total forms ready for reconciliation, and then percentage of locked based on total forms. As a funder, the percentage locked based on total forms would probably be the most interesting column or telling column to be looking at, because it provides you a snapshot, an aggregate snapshot of those organizations that have been locked based on the total pool of forms or organizations at an aggregate level. So in this case, only 1 form is locked, and so it's only 10%. The visualization below provides a breakout of the percentage value. It transposes the information from the report into a visualization. So in this particular case, the chart is available at an aggregate level for all of the programs that one would have selected. So in this particular case, we're only selecting 1 program list because it's testing data. But typically, if I, for example, selected 3 or 4 program lists, this chart would aggregate that data and present the percentages at an aggregate level. And then the chart below would present the information at an individual level. So when I say individual level, I mean by program list, not by organization. So in this case, the results are the same for both charts because we're only using 1 program list. But typically, if you're selecting more than program list, you would also have a breakout per result per program list as well, and then the consolidated version of all the program lists here up above. So this particular report can be useful for staff overseeing, for example, all programs within a granting division. So if you have a director of granting or a manager, to better understand what the aggregate status is of all the programs within a funding agency. And for example, some funders have released funds in installments and need to know quickly how many organizations for a specific year were not reconciled. So this report would allow you to do that quickly at an aggregate level. It can also be really useful to help benchmark and review patterns within your agency based on specific program lists. So seeing which programs, for example, tend to get locked faster or maybe slower. And it's really a snapshot, but at an aggregate level. It could also be helpful in understanding when and how to communicate to organizations at specific times if you see, for example, that certain programs might be lagging behind in terms of the numbers at an aggregate level.
Now that we have seen the demonstration, we are at part 7, where we will talk about the resources and support available to you as you start engaging with the CADAC reports or any other aspect of CADAC. Now we can dive into the resources available for you. There are several types of support resources available to you as you start using CADAC. We have created a series of user guides, support documents, FAQ documents, and training videos. You can access all of those resources by visiting cadac.ca and clicking on the training menu at the top. From the menu, click on Training for Agencies. This will open up the training and support page, and you will be able to access all of the support documents and training videos available. This concludes our training video. Please feel free to reach out to us if you need any help. Thank you.